All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Learning Kitchen Live. My name is Liz, and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, and I work here in the Food and Health Policy Department at Community Servings. So glad to have you tuning in today, and just a reminder, if you're looking for the recipe, you can find it in the comments section. So today we're going to be making a delicious dish called Shakshuka. It's a spicy tomato bell pepper sauce that comes together with some eggs at the end. Shakshuka is actually a dish that's really popular in Middle Eastern countries and also in Northern Africa. And the word actually means a haphazard mixture or all mixed up, which is exactly what we're going to be doing today. We'll be adding in some tomatoes and bell peppers and mixing that together with some nice warm spices. But this dish is very versatile because you can actually add whatever vegetables you'd like, any proteins or grains as well. It's also a really versatile dish that comes together in one pan that you can make for any meal. It's a great breakfast, it's a nice brunch, it also makes a light and satisfying dinner. In fact, you could also cook the sauce in advance and freeze it and have a nice meal waiting for you for a night that you don't feel like cooking. So let's go ahead and get started. I already have preheated my oven to 375 degrees because we're going to finish the final step by baking the eggs in the oven. And I also have about 2 tablespoons of olive oil heating up in the pan here that we're gonna add an onion to. So I've already started dicing my onion, and I just wanna get this soft and translucent in the pan. But I also wanna talk to you about safety when cutting an onion. One thing I like to do is always cut it in half so that way that I have a nice flat surface for making my cuts. I also keep the root end intact, and what that does is keeps all the layers of the onions together so it doesn't slide around as much when you're trying to chop it. So I'm going to go ahead and make just a couple other cuts here so that we can finish dicing this up and adding it into our pan. You can hear my onions starting to sizzle here, and you can see that was pretty easy to cut through. No sliding layers, no cut fingers, which is really nice. I'm also going to add just a small pinch of salt to this just to help the onions start to release their juices and start to soften up. Next, we're going to add bell pepper. This recipe calls for 1 bell pepper. I've chosen to use jarred bell peppers mostly from a time-saving perspective. It's something that I always have in my pantry, and it's a great, I know I'm not going to use the whole jar. It's a great thing to add to salads or to pasta or even sandwiches later on. Of course, if you have bell peppers in your refrigerator, or maybe you like to get those little mini bell peppers, these would work just fine in the recipe, and you just chop those up and add them in. So I'm going to go ahead and add these in. It's also nice when you're using the jarred bell peppers because they are roasted and peeled for you already. So that's also a nice time saver. I'm just going to start to mix this together. I'm going to bump up my heat a little bit so those start to soften. All right. Next, we'll add about 3 cloves of garlic that are already chopped and diced up here. And this also calls for just 2 tablespoons of canned tomato paste. I don't know about you, but oftentimes you never really need the full can of tomato paste, and it's kind of like, what do I do with the rest of it? So at home, I'll often just use my tablespoon and measure out the rest of the can, and I'll put it on parchment paper and put it in my freezer. I've noticed that a lot of recipes only call for a couple tablespoons of tomato paste at a time. So if I find a new recipe I'm going to make, it calls for tomato paste, I can just reach in my freezer and grab out those individual tablespoons that are already frozen and ready to cook. So that's just a nice time saver there. All right, this is starting to come together and soften a little bit. I'm looking for my onions to look a little bit more clear. Stir those. You can hear it sizzling, which is really nice. And so I'm going to go ahead and add my garlic and my tomato paste together, and also my spices. This dish has some really warm spices in it. It has cumin and it's got smoked paprika. And I'm also going to add red pepper flakes, which I like a little bit of spice. But if you don't, you could certainly leave that out without worrying about compromising the flavor of the dish itself. So I'm now just going to start mixing this together because I want the tomato paste to really coat the onions and the bell peppers well. I'm also going to give this a little bit more time because I really want the flavors of the spices to warm and develop. I can start to smell my garlic already. I can smell my cumin and paprika cooking really nicely together. So I'm just going to give this a little time to come together, which is looking pretty good. All right. So next we will add crushed fire roasted tomatoes. If this is something that you don't have on hand, you could use whole peeled tomatoes, you could use diced tomatoes. Sometimes the fire roasted is a little tricky to find in the store. So just use whatever you have on hand, but you want to have 28 ounces to add in to make this sauce. So I'm adding that in now. I'm going to get all the last bits out. And I also want to add in some cilantro. I know this is sort of one of those polarizing herbs that a lot of people like cilantro. You could certainly add parsley. That would be just fine and a nice substitute as well. So really, that's all the ingredients that we need to add together. Like I said, this comes together really quickly, and now we're just going to let these flavors start to meld together. So I'm just going to let it hang out a little bit on the stovetop and start to simmer and let those spices really fuse together. And so like I said, shakshuka is a really nice dish because you can serve it for so many different meals, breakfast, brunch, or dinner. It's also great because it uses a lot of items that you might already have in your pantry. And I really like to try to keep my pantry stocked with some quick recipe ingredients like shakshuka, particularly at the holiday season, because it seems like whenever you get together, there's an indulgent meal to be had. And so it's really nice to have your kitchen and your pantry prepped and ready for you so that you can go in there and make some nice, light, nutritious meals just using the ingredients that you already have in your pantry. Also, this sauce is a great source of vitamin C and vitamin A. Those comes from the peppers and from the tomatoes. That vitamin C is particularly nice at this time of year when cold and flu season is sneaking upon us. It's also a great source of fiber that you'll get from the vegetables. But this dish is really nice because you could certainly add additional vegetables to it if you'd like. Oftentimes you'll see shakshuka with artichokes and olives added to it, but you can really think seasonally about what you might like to add to this to enhance the fiber content. In the summertime, you could certainly add some squash, or it might be really nice to add some eggplant if you have that on hand. In the wintertime, I really enjoy adding some roasted butternut squash because I think it's a nice addition to the tomato flavors. You could even add some chickpeas to this to help boost the protein content. All right, so this is starting to come together. Really and truly, you can let this cook for as long as you'd like, probably somewhere around 6 minutes or so, up to 8 minutes, just to let those flavors continue to marry together. But for the sake of time, I think I'm going to go ahead and add the last step, which is our eggs. And eggs are going to be your main source of protein in this dish. One egg provides about 6 grams of protein, and it's a great non-meat source of protein to add to this dish. And so the way that we're going to do this is I kind of flatten out my tomato sauce, and then I'm going to start to make a little well for my egg to just nest it in there and cook. So I'll show you how to do that. I like to do these eggs around the perimeter of the dish, and those will just sort of fill in there like that. Eggs are one of those protein sources that sort of have gotten a bad rep. I think a lot of people worry about them being high in cholesterol. And while they do have about 200 milligrams of dietary cholesterol, they have a lot of benefits, like I was talking about with the protein. It has biotin and a lot of other antioxidants that are really good for you as well. So research is saying that including eggs in your diet, that dietary cholesterol really isn't as big of a risk as of increasing your cholesterol as it is coming from saturated fats and trans fats. So eggs can definitely be a nice source of healthy protein to include in your diet in moderation. Another really nice thing about eggs is they keep for a long time in your refrigerator. you can actually keep them about 4 to 6 weeks past the sell-by date. And so that's a nice option. I know a lot of things are definitely becoming more expensive at the grocery store now, so this is a protein source that can be in your refrigerator for a while and is ready for you when you're ready to cook it. So that's it. We're now going to finish this dish off in the oven. I've got my egg sort of nested in, and again, I'm going to put this in the oven at 375 degrees. You want this to cook for a range of time, for about 8 minutes if you like to have your egg whites a little looser and a little bit runnier yolk for your egg. But if you want to have a more fuller cooked egg and have a nice thick solid egg white, I would recommend cooking it up to 12 minutes. But once you hit that 8-minute mark, it's good to just kind of start checking in and seeing how those eggs are looking. So we'll go ahead and add this in. And of course, I want you to see what this looks like. So I've already made a version to share, and so we can talk about toppings. All right. So I just added 4 eggs here. So I'm just going to portion out about 1 egg, get a nice full serving of that tomato sauce that's nice and spicy, and warm spices from the cumin. You'll see I'm sure to serve this with a nice piece of crusty bread, or pita would be really nice because it's great to sop up those extra flavors from the sauce. I also like to add a little bit of feta cheese to top this. I think the briny tanginess of the feta is great. And it's also nice if you have some of your leftover cilantro to top on top too. So there you have it. This is a great breakfast, a nice brunch, or a light satisfying dinner that you can make now or through the holiday season. And I sure hope you'll give it a try. So thanks so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time on Learning Kitchen Live.